Hello, everyone. We will now begin our roundtable discussion on how to plan for adoption of additive manufacturing at scale, productivity, materials, and safety, which will be led by Janet Carr, CMO of Winthrop, and Vishal Singh, CTO of Winthrop. We will have joined with us Winthrop Sheldon, VP of Sales and Marketing from SLM Solutions North America, William Herbert, Director of Technology and R&D at Carpenter Additive, Nate Harris, VP of Sales from PostProcess Technologies, and Dr. Diaz, Senior Chemist Engineer from REM Surface Finishing.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction.
Of course.
So before we get started, I thought maybe we can go from left to right and have everyone introduce ourselves from this wonderful image here. Do you want to start with Dr. Diaz? Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Excellent. There's a lot of background noise. I don't know where it's coming from. So my name is Dr. Agustin Diaz. I work at REM Surface Engineering. I've been working on surface finishing of metal additive components for the last 6 years. So I specialize on surface characterization, surface morphology of AEM components coming from different type of build technology like powder bed fusion, direct energy deposition, binary jetting, what's not, how to do the characterization, and then how to do a surface finishing operation to achieve smooth, nice surfaces that produce optimal performance on the mechanical stress.
Perfect. And as we're waiting for William to load up, Nate, do you want to take it a go?
I barely can hear you.
Yeah, it's going in, the audio is going in and out a little bit.
Okay. Nate, you want to give it a go?
Sure. Let me know if we're hearing myself okay. But Nathan Harris, I'm the Vice President of Sales for North America for PostProcess. I've been with the company about 1.5 years and about 6 years in the additive space. I had some exposure, obviously, a lot to metals, such as DED, FDM, Polyjet, SLA, MGF, and a series of other technologies as well. 14, 15 years prior to that in telecommunications. But in case our audience didn't know, our particular company, PostProcess, we're about a decade old, 60-person company spanning the US, Europe, and Japan. 100% focused on technologies that address support removal, as well as surface finishing of additive parts across a series of different technologies, including submersion technologies, spray technologies, certainly in the case of surface finishing, sometimes using media or vibratory technology, or targeted media slurry. So a lot of things there, but just trying to give you the point that we're involved in support removal and surface finishing specifically with an additive focus. And in addition to that, we don't just have a hardware solution. We have hardware, software, chemistry, or media. We think collectively produce better part outcomes more consistently with predictability. But anyway, that's my infomercial. Just want to say hi. Thanks for having us on board.
We skipped you there, William. Do you mind sharing as well, Rebecca?
Just me, Janet, sorry. I'm having some technical difficulties here with the platform. So hi everyone, I'm Will Herbert, so I work at Carpenter Additive. My role is Director of Technology, so really there's 3 things we're focused on. Number 1 is providing specialty alloys feedstock, so like powders and wire into the additive industry. We also work on powder lifecycle management solutions, like how to reuse, recycle, certified powders. And then the final piece is we start offering end-to-end solutions, so that is additive manufacturing, shipping, and basically we're a metallurgical company fundamentally, so we really support the industry here from the perspective of the material, how you get good properties out of it, how do you make sure your process is stable and equivalent.
And Winthrop, would you like to share your background?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Janet, for having me on this panel. It's nice to be here today. I'm with SLM Solutions. We're a metal additive manufacturing equipment manufacturer. We're based in northern Germany, near Hamburg. I work for the U.S. entity. We have a U.S. facility based out of Winthrop, Michigan. I've been in additive manufacturing since late 2013, and been with S1 for most of that time. I did spend a year and a half with another manufacturer of equipment that's also part of the event this week. So it's a pleasure to be here, and looking at production with additive manufacturing is a key area of our focus at S1 Solutions. So it's a great panel for us to be participating in. So thanks again for having us.
Thank you. And how about you, Vishal?
Thank you, Janet. Hi, my name is Vishal Singh. I'm the CTO and co-founder at Link3D. At Link3D, our vision is to help companies scale their additive journeys from different stages to managed, automated, and predictive stage. And that is what we achieve by providing a unified data model, unified data layer, interconnected ecosystem, and automation through all the stages from design to delivery.
Perfect. And my name is Janet Carr, Chief Marketing Officer at Link3D, and working alongside with our team to help enable that. So if you have any ideas, feel free to reach out. And in the meantime, today, what we're gonna spend the next 30, 40 minutes or so talking today is how to plan for adoption for additive manufacturing at scale. I'm really excited about this panel because we have folks from all walks. You know, we have everyone from, we have folks from the material side, Carpenter Additive, to the production side with Winthrop from SLM, then post-processing, and then finishing with Nate and Dr. Diaz, and then also the digital aspect with my colleague here, Vishal Singh. So before we get started, you know, want to congratulate you, William, and your team. You guys just recently launched a $40 million facility to enable additive manufacturing. And I know when we were preparing for this panel, you said that there's a lot of things that you would have done differently, especially when you guys were designing this production facility to scale up additive. Just curious if you can share some of your stories there so that we can all learn from your experiences. To start.
Well, Janet, yeah, so it was a really interesting project. As Janet said, we just opened this place in January. It's near Huntsville in Alabama, so it's really in the engineering ecosystem of the greater Huntsville area. A lot of space, a lot of defense down there, a lot of aerospace. So we're excited to be in that location. It was a major project. I mean, it took us the best part of 2 years, so about 9 months worth of preparation, doing the architecture and everything, and then best part of 12 to 15 months of construction, which we time and on budget and to scope as well. So I guess to start with the things that went well, our vision for this site was basically have somewhere where we can put adjacent to our powder manufacturing facility, put in some additive machines, put in a machine shop, a large industrial scale HIP, hot isostatic press, and then some of the heat treating capabilities, basically so we could demonstrate to our customers and to our partners in the supply chain, under one roof you can do everything. You can go soup to nuts, and you can make the powder, and then you can send a part out the other end that's totally finished to specification. And through that whole process, capturing the data and the information at each step. So when you do it over and over again, we really get to hone in on the operational steps and hone in on kind of the material quality, making sure that that's consistent. So I guess that the vision sort of became reality, and I'm really happy that happened, like I said, on time, even though it took us 2 years as planned. We've made a really cool collaborative space because we don't design stuff ourselves, we help our customers design. So until about 2 weeks ago, when the president put a stop to international and now getting more and more restricted on national travel, we had a lot of people come down and kind of work with us there, and we look forward to open that back up as soon as we're through these restrictive periods because of the crisis.
Yeah.
I guess the final thing that went right was just the quality systems. So we're really keen on making sure we're aerospace, medical, fully quality accredited. We're lucky to work in a bigger company. We have 5,000 people. We have a staff of like 10, 15 quality engineers, and they were able to basically within 2 months, they've got us transferred and put under the same registrar. So we're all good to go after 2 months with the quality as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, we have Winthrop here from SLM. Can you give some perspective on, when an organization first adopts additive manufacturing and their goal is to have a very large additive manufacturing initiative like Carpenter Additive, how do you ask them, how do you plan with them on how to develop that scalable program? And if they're new to additive, what are the first steps they should take when thinking about launching their initiatives?
That's a great question, Janet. In this day and age, in 2020, we have many different customers coming into laser powder bed additive manufacturing with different levels of experience. There's not as many customers that are coming in cold with little to no experience this stage and with the ambition to go straight to production. Some are, but I think the production will take them some time to get to. And the way that companies are starting with laser powder bed fusion, are fairly well known. I mean, they definitely relate to things like prototypes, design aids, jigs and fixtures, and other types of traditional production tools that can basically help them avoid bottlenecks with regards to their other manufacturing processes. But more and more, we're seeing companies avoid supply chain constraints, which is very much a topical subject. These days, right now, dealing with the fallout from the coronavirus. We're also dealing with high complex designs for very high performance type devices and products that require a new form of manufacturing. And so there's a lot of different ways that companies, are looking at getting into metal additive manufacturing. But as we look at their steps to consider, we like to look at, the various different sizes of the machines. There's benefits to smaller machines and obviously benefits to larger machines. And we like to look at the workflow around those machines, the environmental health and safety considerations of running the equipment, and some of the technical factors regarding the build process itself and the scalability across various machines with regard to building families of products or different types of products, but being able to use research and development or other developments with regard to additive manufacturing for different form factors, different sizes of components. That's an area where many times customers are selecting SLM solutions for that flexibility across platform size and the similarity in running the various different machines that we have.
Thank you for that. Yeah, health and safety is extremely important, and also developing the infrastructure that could allow for scale depending on where you are. So Nate and Dr. Diaz, I was just curious from your point of view, what are things that people need to think about when designing the downstream manufacturing process? What are they not thinking about that should have been considered right from the start? I was wondering if, Nate, you can start with that.
Yeah, well, it's certainly going to depend upon the goal, right? An additive operation that's fairly small, maybe they're looking to do some just prototyping, conceptual design, maybe some communication parts where throughput may not necessarily be high, or speed is not necessarily, or consistency is not necessarily a priority. Part is a requirement, maybe a little bit of manual labor or maybe some antiquated equipment or chemistries might suffice, but if the intention of the operation, which I think is a lot of the discussion we're having here today, is to say production level output, right? Quality is necessary from part to part. Consistency is paramount. Throughput and speed are valued. And someone doesn't say have the money to have or resources to hire assembly line workers like we did in the early 1900s to process parts, then yes, something that is automated, something that's intelligent, a fully stacked solution is certainly going to be something that someone needs to consider in order to scale their production level for additive.
Can you hear me? Hey, Nate, can you mute yourself a little?
I'm sorry?
Can you mute yourself for a second?
Yes.
It's like a lot of background noise. Sorry. Perfect. So basically, I agree completely with Nate was saying. It's really important to take into account what is going to be the final applicability of the component. What is the surface finishing that you require? What is the applicability? So, and of course, going to be depending of the technology that you're using. You need to understand the surface. The first stuff that I recommend all the customers is like, let's study your surface. Different technologies, different parameters. Every time that you change a parameter in an equipment, you're changing the surface morphology that you're producing. Every time that you change parameters on the laser contour, powder size, powder purity, how many times you recycle the powder, you can have a specific feature on that surface. So first of all, you need to understand the surface that you're producing with the parameters that you already have locked in. Now, based on that, you can determine how much material, because it's basically all of the surface finishing technology that exists out there is kind of subtractive. We're going to be removing material from that surface in order to achieve that planarization that most customers are looking into. So based on that morphology, then you understand how much material you need to add extra in your build in order to give us room to do that surface finishing and achieve that planarization. Something that we have found over and over is that sometimes a lot of porosity can be seen at the near surface for some reason or another. So if you already know that you have that problem with porosity, you can compensate creating extra material, and our surface finishing technology is capable of removing that amount of metal that is going to take out all that partially sintered powder, melt pools, and what's not, all that stuff that you have on the surface, reach that porosity, and then pass that porosity. That way you get a really nice component with a lot of structural integrity at that point, and that's when you see also that improvement on mechanical performance. But for some cases, you don't even need surface finishing, right? So everything will depend on the applicability, as Nate was saying.
Mm-hmm. Agree. There's so much data that's also generated throughout the entire process on the material side, production side, post-processing side. I know, sorry. I know on this panel, actually SLM, post-process, and Link3D also, and Carpenter also have a big digital strategy behind enabling production. Vishal, I was just curious from your point of view, how does a company need to think about planning for adoption of additive, and what are the digital, what's your digital point of view to enable qualification programs or to enable scale of production? Or hey, if you're not there yet, what is an ideal way to ensure that you're on the right track and set yourself up for the right infrastructure when you are ready to scale?
Thank you, Janet. That's a great question and kind of one of my favorite topics too. So Dr. Diaz mentioned about all these parameters that are coming out, right? So what's happening actually, we are doing these experiments, we are doing this printing processes, right? So at the end, we are generating tons of data, but where is the decision matrix? How am I taking this data into processes or converting them into recipes for repeatable, successful prints? And kind of that's the general topic, like how do you scale? You want to go away from individual machine behavior or material lot behavior to a consistent, repeatable process. And the only way to achieve that is understanding the nuances which the data can expose. There are certain things which may or may not be captured by the data. That depends on the nature of what you're capturing. But the general, like the goal or the vision here that collectively, like all of us, like the industry itself is moving towards is, how do we capture data all along? Like this is all digital manufacturing, all the data at different stages could be captured, and how do we convert that into more knowledge base, like kind of like a design rule or production rule, or kind of like a recipe for production, which could be applied to a certain machine, and so on. So my like I was mentioning, Janet, previously, like one of the ways we need to address this is come up with a unified data modeling layer, and ASTM has been doing a lot of work on that, and even at Link3D we are doing a lot of work on that side.
speaking on that, Will, what's your perspective on that? Since you guys do have a software like PowderSoft to enable some of these discussions.
Sure. I mean, I completely agree with my friend Vishal here. You know, data is going to be critical to this industry. I mean, at Carpenter, we consider it foremost a metallurgical technology, right? A way of making alloys, because we do metal AM. But secondarily, it's this modern version which you can actually collect data while you're doing it. And I think the industry traditionally has a way to certify materials, a way to create design envelopes or allowables for materials, which is very systematic, right? It takes much effort and maybe a lot of investment to create a number of different feedstock inputs. You need either 3 or 10, depending on what you're trying to do. You need to run it through a bunch of different processes, and then you need to get all the output data and say, okay, am I consistent? Is my material consistent? Is it equivalent? Depending on what process, what machine I'm running it through. You know, I think the industry has a massive opportunity here to basically aggregate data where possible, where we're going to make that open and get much, much quicker to that stage where we say, okay, that material going in, the number of recycles that it's had, the machine that we put it in, and then the post-processing and the finishing that we apply gives you these fatigue properties, and it gives you these high temperature tensile properties, right? I mean, we're just going to have to band together, and the industry, as Vishal said, ASTM is doing some, the SAE committee is doing some, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other committees, but it's really waiting for some of you guys who are listening on the phone to take the lead and create that data lake that we can all validate this technology with.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And Winthrop, from your point of view, you know, as a machine manufacturer, we need, like, once we understand the material properties and are able to control it, then it's how do we manage the production parameters of the machine? What are the challenges that we need to overcome as an industry to enable this vision?
Yeah, I agree with my two fellow panelists to their responses previously. The amount of data that's in our industry today is overwhelming when you look at this process as an additive manufacturing as a manufacturing process. I think one of the things that F1 brings to the table is an open architecture that is quite valuable to our customers, you know, allowing them to optimize parameter settings for specific applications. Those applications can be optimized for speed, for surface finish, for material properties, and many other different considerations. But when you have an open system, you actually just increase the amount of data that's in your organization, especially if you're running in a controlled environment for different customers. It makes it even more complex. So, you know, groups like Link3D, this emerging space of MES for additive manufacturing is critical. Obviously, process monitoring within the machines themselves is critical. And then, of course, standardization of the construction of the machines and standardization of the workflow around the machines is also critical. So there's many different areas that all need to mature and develop in parallel for the technology to continue to grow in its adoption. But you know, I really like the comments from Vishal and Will along these lines.
Awesome. And this actually brings us to a nice Q&A side for you, Nathan. You know, with all this information related to serial production and qualification, there's just so much information out there. Does post-processing equipment differ much from AM equipment or AM material qualification? Can you share more about how you guys might follow IQ, OQ, PQ methodology to enable organizations to get qualified as well?
Yeah, and by the way, love the dialogue that we're having here because I think it's really important. But you know, certainly it was probably 10 years ago or a decade ago that our founder Daniel actually recognized that if this additive world was going to scale up to what we dreamed it would be and do meaningful part one, that automation was going to be a critical component to the third step. We consider the third step to be design, print, and post-print, right? And today, right now, we have a software on board our systems, what we call automated, that operates really sort of as the brains of the hardware, software, chemistry, or media solution. And automated executes the code. It deploys the right amount of energy based on what I call recipes, noting facts about materials or geometries and such. And so users of our equipment found that at least incredibly helpful in lowering manual labor, introducing outcome predictability into the end solution, increasing throughput, reducing waste, obviously due to breakage or overbuild demands that may come with some sort of integrated equipment that's being used. And it was a bit of the customer, I wouldn't say it was the customer demand, but the vision of our founder just to start making investments in building that database roughly 10 years ago. But, you know, as we move forward and we start talking about certifying parts or certifying processes into labs, automating that last step is going to be really important. And so it's really getting to the next step, what we call predictable post-printing, and having some insights, even at the design stage, to understand, number one, you know, can we post-print that particular part based on the available technology? Number two, if it's possible, you know, what's the equipment combined with the software to execute the right recipe to be successful in the final step? And so this is what we've been working on for quite some time now. We should have a platform that will be for release late this year, if not going into next year, called Connected. And that's really connecting that digital thread that we've talked a lot about, the print, the design, the print, and post-print. So we really understand very early in the process what post-processing is going to look like, what design considerations we might want to change to obviously streamline the post-print step and increase the throughput and output of that. And so that's what we work on, and within the limitations we have today, and this is where we'd like to start to invite some additional partnerships. We've talked to Materialize, we've talked to 3Your Mind and others to really start to get some insights of how to ingest that information, that data about parts, so then we can really start to build that library, what's going to be required to do post-printing. We've got the library already, but really just to accelerate that process, I think it would be a huge added value.
And Dr. Diaz, do you have any thoughts on, I guess, the finishing thought on how the digital thread from build file to final product can really enable benefits for production for the entire process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at Drum Surface Engineering, we have been working on the surface finishing for over 55 years now. So we are really well versed on all these standards and ways to put processes in place. We are really big with the aerospace industry, automotive, and what's not. So basically, the software is really valuable tool, but is to store this data. But ultimately, the focus on post-processing needs to be on the efficacy of this process technology. So,
great.
On those lines, basically, yeah, the technology is into a point that a lot of standards need to be put in place. There's a lot of needs a lot of help from us, from the industry, to use what we know from other type of industry, another type of manufacturing, to be placed into the technology, right, and helping to keep moving forward.
And speaking of more standards in place, we have this battling two questions, one for Winthrop, one for Vishal, but Winthrop's the one's on first. Thanks, Duncan William Gibbons. Is it customary for machine OEMs such as SLM Solutions perform or provide machinery FMEAs after installation, or is it up to the customer to perform this?
That's a great question. I was happy to see that come up in the Q&A. The way that we address this is basically through the production procedures. So we do extensive testing of each machine as it comes off the manufacturing line at our facility in Germany. And many customers opt to go one step further and do specific sort of run-off build, exercising the machine with the material that they intend to use, at least at the beginning of operation of the equipment when it gets to their site. And in so doing, we basically verify the outcome of any FMEA that will happen during production. You know, the variability with the volumes of the machines today is significantly better than what it was even 5 years ago. We still have a lot of strides to make as an industry compared to other industries, but it's not needed to do an independent FMEA with each machine that's installed. And many times customers replicate that build at the factory at their own site to ensure the results are nominal and replicated directly. So it's a great question, because we used to hear so many stories of many elements of the process, but in particular machines, leaving the factory and arriving to site called snowflakes. And that's not the best term for a manufacturing tool. So I think those days are behind us now as we move forward.
And William, just from your perspective, because you guys just launched a new factory and are managing all of your machines, do you guys re-qualify or do any additional testing? Like, what do you do to make sure that all the machines that you install are good to go according to your standards and production requirements?
Yes, so it's a really good question for anybody starting out building a facility, because picking the machines there's a lot of choice out there. There's a lot of new features coming out every month. I mean, fundamentally, what you want to do is choose something that works and that your customers are going to accept quickly, right? So we, from our perspective, we have access to about 7 different OEMs type of machines. We did a benchmarking test before we even issued any POs. So we went out to all of the companies and we said, look, here's a challenging build. Here's a material that we understand really well. Can you guys go execute that build and then send it back to us? And we're going to go and do our testing. So I'd encourage everybody, I'm sure this Winthrop's going to be pulling his hair out when I say this, but I encourage everybody to do that benchmarking round robin that allows you to really build a relationship with the machine builders. And it also gives you really good insight into how responsive they are, into how the machine behaves, if the material quality is what you expect it to be, so on. And then obviously when the machines got delivered on site, we run through the whole thing again, not just as a training exercise, but to revalidate the actual serialized numbers that we have that got sent to our site. Is it still calibrated properly? Is it, have we done all the safety checks that our guys happy to sign off with from the engineering team and so on? So in summary, I would do it before you buy the machine, and then I would do it again when you buy the machine, and then I would do it again every 6 months or even more frequently, depending on what you're servicing.
And a quick note on Nate and Dr. Diaz, is that what you recommend as well for the post-production equipment?
First one, absolutely. It's really interesting to see, in my experience, and hopefully it's an experience of most people on the panel, the amount of time and energy and effort and money and resources that are allocated to exploring design software and also printer technologies, that the post-print solution is typically an afterthought. And I think that if people are really trying to build out the facilities and really try to understand what they're trying to accomplish from a throughput perspective, consistency perspective, volume perspective, then they need to make sure that's an important evaluation step. And I agree, bringing in parts and having a company benchmark those parts based on what the materials, the geometries, and the technologies are available, I think is critical, because we see it all too often. People spend a lot of money on software and printers, and then all of a sudden the very highly paid lab manager is over there with dental tools, picking out parts, and also getting pretty frustrated with that whole process. So that's not something that needs to happen if someone's done the perfect planning.
Mm-hmm. Anything you want to add there, Dr. Diaz?
Yeah. Basically, how we do it is like when you design and you have all the ideas on the design of the component that you have. I will always go, and this is how basically we work with our customers. Like, they print a prototype. That prototype is developed, and then we do the surface finishing on that based on the actual needs that they have, so they can test it. So first, we need to validate like a pilot batch, and this is something that can be like downscale, like maybe 1 to 5 components. But if it's needed, we can do 120 or 1,000 components. That would depend of the actual applicability that they have. So have something like a PPPA. AP, sorry, and then with that scale. So installation of equipment is possible, but everything would depend of the actual component that you're going to be building and the specific need. So we have several type of technologies that we use, and depending of your need, we recommend to use either one of them. So that's basically something to have in mind. What is going to be the final applicability that you need to achieve, and the type of equipment and technology that is going to be needed to achieve it.
Thank you. I think we have a pretty well-rounded answer there for the first question. Another popular question here we have from Dan Grunemer from X1. Vishal, when you talk about universal data modeling layer, ASTM, SE, NIST, ISO, will this layer ultimately be harmonized so we OEMs, machine manufacturers like X1, SLM, maybe even PostProcess and around servicing in the future, be harmonized so we can all follow one set of definitions?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dan. So generally, my experience with that is manufacturers are internally trying to standardize what they are collecting today. And machine manufacturers have like some of the machine manufacturers are more open and are sharing that know-how. So, but also in a more, it can be made more open, like more industry-wide as opposed to in private silos. I do see that harmonization happening because it is a necessity or a need right now. Every process, every material, or every process, every technology has a different canonical model in some sense. So for example, FDM versus binder jetting versus DMLS versus E-beam, every process has a different set of parameters that you need to be tracking in different. This is a very hard problem in additive actually because of the dynamic environment of the build process itself, and also because of the nature of the geometry and the build envelope itself, like the locations of the part within the build envelope. So not just we need a canonical model per process, but we also need some level of modeling on the build envelope and the geometry itself to capture that data at different locations. But to answer your question, the industry is going towards that. I saw a data dictionary initiative previously by ASTM, and working with several customers of ours, we are seeing that internally happening with some of the manufacturers. Working with several manufacturers ourselves, machine manufacturers, we are observing that they are sharing that kind of canonical models today, which can be made available to their customers. And all of that is in some sense converging today.
Anyone want to give some comments on that from the team? Mm-hmm.
What was the root element of the question, Janet? Was it about the software kernel type architecture, or the question went away on the list here, so I couldn't reread it?
For the architecture, data architecture.
So I can rephrase it if you want, Winthrop and William, for you maybe. So the question is, all these standards are coming up with some data modeling, like what are the data fields that should be captured for different processes, and is that converging into a unified standard or not yet? And what's our take on that, generally speaking?
Yeah, I mean, my opinion from the industry is that I think any set of standards is positive because it allows for some level of convergence, and then we can debate one set group of statements or thoughts or measures around the process. I think one of the challenges we've had in the earlier years is that there's sort of an argument around what to even focus on and measure. And if the leading bodies come out with an initial list of what to be focused on and what to monitor, I think it will help, again, the maturing of the whole process and the whole use of additive manufacturing. And then, of course, the refinement and the debate around whether or not certain attributes or characteristics are truly important, to maintaining quality or known outcomes from the process. As a machine manufacturer, and to date with basically no software strategy per se, as a pure machine manufacturer, we're interested in the process of actually lasing the metal and making the components. And so the more things that allow for a known environment around how to measure and what to expect coming out of the machine, we feel that the better for the overall industry and the better for, I think, all of our customers to bring more applications to the market, using additive manufacturing. So kind of an indirect answer, a little different approach there, but I think any bit of standards is a help to our industry at this stage.
Well, we pretty much need to wrap up right now. I know Vishal directed a question at you, William, but if you do want to answer that, feel free to. Otherwise, we will end this panel and have the next speaker speak.
All right, thank you very much, Janet. It's a pleasure to be on the panel.
All right, well, thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Really appreciate it. I know we'll be here. There's a virtual networking session after the next two presentations, and we thank you for participating and sharing your insights on how to scale for adoption. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.